specifically to help stabilize the financials, which took about 2 years, and then I was made CEO. Before I came to Bancroft, I worked with the University of Pennsylvania Health System for 15 years, so I grew up in the healthcare world. I had various positions in those 15 years, all on the operations and finance track. My last position there was the CFO of Pennsylvania Hospital. I'm an accountant through and through, an accounting major. I graduated from the Penn State University and I got my master's in health administration from St. Joe's. And finally, I'm currently a board member on 3 boards, and I'll talk a little bit about my perspective of the role of the board, especially in nonprofits. I'm the chairwoman at Pierce College. I'm a member of the Inspira Health Board, and I'd like to welcome Dawn, who is my colleague on that board. And finally, I'm a director at Fulton Financial Corporation, so Fulton Bank. I've been on that board for about a decade now, based in Lancaster. So I have the nonprofit and I have the public board experience as well. So you can see the title of my presentation today is Too Important to Fail, which is also the title of my book. If you have any interest in ordering the book or picking up the book, that can certainly help you on the way out. And again, anybody who can stay at the end and would like a tour, we've got people set up to help you if you want to see more of the campus as well. You know, I'm often asked why I wrote a book, and especially because I'm an accountant and numbers speak to me and words come really, really hard. It was certainly a labor of love. There will not be a sequel, so don't be looking for that. Not my thing. But I'm really, really glad I did it, and really, I would say the same of why I like to speak about it for a couple of reasons. And what I hope you really get out of my talk today is first, I like to talk about Bancroft. I was shocked, I have to tell you, when I came here. I never heard of it, didn't know it existed, had no idea of just how important this organization was. And so I really wanted to make a point to really make, broaden the awareness of the work that they do. The second reason, of course, is to share some of my leadership lessons, and I hope you will do that the same. I think the more we can learn from each other's experience, the better. So I hope that there's a few nuggets you get to take away from some of my lessons. And then finally, I really like to talk about nonprofits. I feel that there's a myths, if you will, about nonprofits. So I like to dispel a lot of those. And I really think that it's important that everybody recognizes the importance of nonprofits in our community. They play a really significant role. They're really important, and I think we'll have a role in really helping them be sustainable. So I'm hoping to get a little bit of something like that out of my talk today. So I will start here. So when it doesn't work right off the bat. There we go. Thank you. So here's how I've outlined today's discussion. As I said, I'll start with Bancroft so that you know a little bit of context when I talk about the second thing about the financial crisis that I arrived to in 2004. The vision realized, you are sitting in it. I'll talk a little bit about how the journey we got here, and then really focus on nonprofits, right? Like why I think they're so important. And why so many of them fail. Again, I think there's a lot of lessons in there so that we can make sure that that the gaps and services they provide are sustainable. And then, of course, a few final spots. So first, the organization is 140 years old. Our founder was Margaret Bancroft. She was 18 years old. She was a teacher in Philadelphia, and she saw that she had one student that was learning at a much slower pace than others. But she recognized that if she took that one student and spent more time with her and changed her approach, she too could learn and grow like everybody else. So she took that one student over to school in Haddonfield, New Jersey, 18 years old. We talk about a visionary, right? 140 years later, I think about her all the time. We're doing a ton of celebrations this year, and every time I say she must be beaming. I mean, there's no way, visionary as she was, she could possibly imagine how many lives she would touch in 140 years in such a positive way. I also think it's interesting that in 140 years, I'm only the 9th president. A lot of dedicated people. When you get here, it's really, really hard to leave. Anyway, you can see that the mission of the organization is to profoundly impact children and adults living with disabilities by delivering high quality services to empower them to realize their very best life. Bancroft is not about curing them, it's about accepting them on who they are and helping them live the best life with their disability. A little, there's no presentation I do doesn't have some numbers in it, numbers person. So a little bit about Bancroft in numbers. So we have about 2,800 staff. We serve approximately 2,000 children and adults annually. So we have over 240 group homes and apartments, and that's really throughout South Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. We have 16 facilities and 2 large campuses. This is the children's campus. We have an adult campus in Mulliganville as well. And then 16 facilities, you can see there 4 schools with day programs, outpatient, vocational employment programs. So pretty widespread scope. I think a lot of people think that we're a school, and we are, but we're certainly much more. And you can see we're about 230 million in annual revenue. So who do we serve? So we serve children and adults, and primarily in 2 diagnoses. First and foremost, and our largest population is in the autism and IDD, so intellectual and developmental disabilities. Most of the individuals we serve are from moderate to profound autistic. Most are nonverbal and have significant behavior issues. So those are the types of people that get referred to Bancroft. They come as young as 5, and they're here for as long as you need us. We'll talk about that on the next slide. We also serve those with brain injuries. So these are people who were born typically just like you and I, and had some kind of brain trauma, either acquired or TBI, and you can see many other diagnoses that are served there as well. So when I talk about Bancroft and how we serve you, I think the best way to do it is in the story. And I like to talk about Andy. So Andy came to Bancroft when he was 10 years old, 1967. He came to the Bancroft School, which is how most people find Bancroft. It's the front door of the organization. You start by going to school here. Next thing you know, you need some residential help. You live with us. At 21, and some schools are saying like you got to go find the next thing for you. And I probably say, we have a whole service line of adults, which is our largest service line. And 75% of those that in our adult program came to our school. And so you can see Andy lived at Bancroft, attended the school. At 21, he moved into one of our 240 group homes. He got a job. He worked successfully at a publishing company for years. He has peers, he has friends, he has a social life. They go to the beach, they go to the museums, they truly live good lives. And then as he aged, like the rest of us, we moved into our retirement home. So we have a retirement home of the Flicker residents in the Voorhees, and they live a retired life. They play bingo, they go out, they make crafts, they truly live a good life. And so I think that this is the best way to talk about our continuum of care, because, and it's really what really motivated me when I got to some of the troubles is, we are too far to go. Like, where would Andy go? Right? Where would Andy go? What about the person who is being admitted today? What if they need us for 55 years? Right? So I really think about how so many people depend on Bancroft. So that's a little bit about who we are, just so you can kind of put some context into what I arrived to back in 2004. So this is a picture of the Hadfield campus. This is Lulworth. You can see that a statue of Margaret that you'll see on the tour. We did a whole police escort moving her from the Hadfield campus to the Mount Laurel campus, as she so rightly deserved. But Lulworth, you can see, was built in 1886. Bancroft acquired it in 1956, and it really served as the headquarters of the organization for over 60 years. It's where I spent most of my time when I arrived in 2004. And it's a historic building. It's beautiful on the outside. There's a lot of chaos going on the inside. So let's talk about that. So in 2004, when I arrived, well, I guess before I arrived, the covenants of the organization had been missed for 3 years. It was actually the bank that went directly to the board and said, we're going to pull all our loans if you don't do something here. And so they said, you have to hire a CEO, or you have to get a consultant, you have to kind of turn this place around, or we're just pulling all the debt. So we'll come back to that, but the fact that the bank had to tell the board, I think, is problem number one. But they did. The consultant was hired. The consultant was hired was a man that I used to work for at Heck. So he was the consultant that came, put together a plan, and his first recommendation was you need a CFO who really knows how to deal with these situations. And the consultant, who is the guy I work for, he became the CEO. He hired me as the CFO. And actually, they let go the entire management team and rebuild it from the beginning. And as hard as that must have been for the organization at the time, it was the best thing. Because when we came in, we didn't know who liked who and why they did this. We were just coming in to start fresh. So so I came really fresh in 2004 as the CFO. I always tell the story because I think this is when I came, of course I knew they sent me the financials, so I knew it was in trouble. And my husband's a banker, so he had a whole different perspective on the financials. He's like, like they might not make it, like you get that, right? And I said, I know, like, oh, that'd be so cool, right? To be a CFO who gets to go through a bankruptcy. Like I truly was in this because I just wanted to be a CFO. No clue about the organization. And some red flags started really early on. I remember I started in August and they said, oh, could you come in July? There's going to be to meet the auditors. There's an audit meeting. Sure. So I come in, the guy, the auditor shakes my hand like, thank God you're here. I'm like, this is really an interesting way to start a job. But anyway, so that was my walking in. So as I said, I certainly knew some of the struggles, but you really don't know what's happening in an organization until you sit in the seat. So when I sat in the seat, here's what was going on. We had a negative cash flow for 3 years. We posted a $13 million loss on my first year. We had no availability on lines of credit. Now, I told you that I came from Penn. Penn prints money. I mean, I'm kidding, of course, but there's so much money there. So when we couldn't make payroll, we would call the mothership and they would say, oh, don't do that again, and they would send you money. There was no mothership here, right? I mean, there was no availability on lines of credit. There was no savings. There was nothing. The first 3 months, all I did was answer phones from the vendors saying, we love what you guys do, but we haven't been paid in months. So we're going to have to cut off the utilities. You haven't paid the rent. We're going to have to kick you out. You haven't paid your insurance. We're going to have to cancel the benefit. I mean, it was every day, right? I thought, oh my gosh. So like, just give me a little bit, just a little time. Let me pay you here. Let me pay you here. I mean, it was just really, moving the shell game around. The biggest issue, of course, and I learned about payday, and as a controller and a CFO and all those other things, never really felt payday the way I did here. I mean, it comes every other Friday, whether you're ready or not. And we spent, every Monday morning took 10 days. We would figure out how we're going to make payroll. We would relax on the weekend and start over again. I mean, that was for 2 years. The mailman coming to our door was the highlight of our day. Right? What, do you have any money in there? We used to send people out and go pick up checks. I mean, it was really, I couldn't have never imagined that we were in this position. When the auditors, who, of course, were very happy I was there, they were really on my staff. Literally, they were there looking at kind of what was going on. They issued a going concern. I have to say, I had learned about this as an accounting major. I didn't really think it happened in real life, but it does. And it was really, really eye-opening about just how dire the situation was. And so we began to make proceedings, started meeting with bankrupt lawyers. How do we go through this? What do we all have to do? We searched for a merger partner. We were really nervous that we were going to miss payroll. So, I was always looking how many days out. And, you have to give more notices, something else I learned when you're going to miss payroll. And we were very nervous that if we miss payroll, that people just won't come to work. We won the day, and we needed a merger partner who could help us staffing. So we were well on this journey. It's time to wind this place down. Anyway, so I'm 3 to 6 months in now, I'm working crazy, trying to just put all the pieces together. And somebody came to me and said, you know, Toni, you haven't left your office. You really want to get out and see what Bankrupt's about. And it was true. I really still, at this point, didn't really understand what we did. I knew how much we got paid for everybody. I knew who we weren't being paid for. I knew how much everybody made. But I didn't have any basis to this. So I thought, you know what, that's a really good idea. So I came out one day, we had Bancroft Day, which is, you know, a really happy, open day. It was right on the campus. The people served come, their parents come, the staff come, their kids come. It was this beautiful, beautiful day. And I saw all these faces. And I was struck that day, and you read about this in the book, I was really struck that all these happy faces, and these people coming up to me like, thank you so much for Bancroft. Like, my child is doing things people said, doctors said they would never do. Like, we have an amazing life now because of Bancroft. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm the only one here that knows we're gonna close. And it was a really surreal feeling. And I really left that day thinking, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but right now, all I know is that this place is too important to fail. Like, it's gonna be easier to figure out how to keep it open than it is how to close it. Just too many smiley faces. So even though all the numbers said you're not gonna make it, all the faces said we gotta figure this out. So really went to work there, put together a 2-year plan. And I was recruited to lead a turnaround. I had, you know, done this a few times on different teams at Penn. So I did know how to lead a turnaround, but the one thing you need in a turnaround that you don't always have is time. And in order to have time, you need money, right? Because there was a lot of work you had to do. And, you know, we knew what to do. You have to close programs, right? You have to change different things that you do, but you can't do it overnight. And payday comes every other Friday. So fortunate for me, we had a board member who was a generous benefactor. His name is Ray Welsh. You may have seen his name on the name of the campus when he flew in today. That is how we are honoring him, of course. His son was at Bancroft for 13 years. He had since passed away before I arrived. And Ray and his wife Joanne were really committed to the organization, not only because of what they did for their son Randy, but for they just believed in the organization so much that it needed to be here for so many other families. And they believed in me. And they said, you know, we believe you know how to do this, so we're going to help you out here. So he gave me very generous donations that gave me some time, so I didn't have to worry about payroll. And when that ran out, he gave me an interest-free loan and said, you know, you use this until you need it. And you know, the day we paid him back, I would have to say it was one of my favorite memories of those scary times. But for sure, you know, and I think the message there is you can't wait till you don't have any money to recognize you need a turnaround, right? You need to see this way ahead of time. But I had right, and so he gave me some time. So what did we do? The first thing, and I have to say, I was shocked at this. Nobody in this organization knew just how bad the financials were. There was no talk about it. There's no awareness of it. And I'm a big believer that if you don't know, right, if you don't know you don't have money in your checking account, you just keep spending it. You just keep going to the mall, you keep going to dinner. If nobody says there's no money there, you don't stop your behavior. So the first thing I did was really spend time with the leadership team, and every single one of them said, like, we want to help, right? We love this organization, but nobody told us, right? So awareness, and still today we have monthly financial meetings. Everybody knows every minute of the day our financial positions, because I think it's that important. We had to close the programs. I mean, that's the reality. We had a lot of programs that were not cash flowing. At the time that I came, we had programs in California, Louisiana, and Maine. None of those were making money. And so hard process, but we divested them all and really came back to our core mission, how to get smaller before we got bigger. We outsourced some key functions. Probably one of the biggest decisions I made, tough to do it, but really wouldn't be here today without it, is we outsourced the billing and collection department. So really hardworking people, but it was so complex. There were so many changes in the billing that if you don't know that, you can't You can't keep up with it. So we outsourced that and we restructured the board of trustees, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides. So we stabilized the organization over and then we doubled the size of the organization over the next decade and really prepared for our vision. So let me talk a little bit about that. So, again, I gotta use numbers to tell my story. It was really about building revenue. And you see, and I like this slide, and it goes back to 2004 as well, because every year we grow revenue. You have to grow revenue and keep growing, right? Because you're expensive. They grow whether you want them to or not, right? We're seeing that now even more, right? With inflation. So you've got to continue to grow revenues. I like a nice, easy pace. So you're not doubling the size overnight. You have to understand your funding model. Our funding model, you can see 60% of it is from the state and CMS. So we're very, very dependent on government funding. 21% of schools, we serve 120 school districts send their kids to us. And so we have to build 120 school districts, and they're cost-based, which is very different. Whatever it costs is what they pay, which is very different from some of our fee-for-service programs. So it's understanding how to get paid. So you see 17% is other, and then a small 2% is development, but I have to say that 2% is extremely important. We'll talk a little bit about that upcoming as well. This is our EBITDA, so we really focus on EBITDA because that is, really the cash flow number. And you can see we really have worked hard to get it to around 8%. 8% puts us at right around break even on the bottom line. So really focus, everybody in the organization understands our financial position, which I think is important. So this is the Bancroft campus, or the Hatfield campus. We were there for 135 years. And as I talked about, right, this school was the front door of the organization. So even though it was tired and we ran out of space, all those real reasons, to me, the reason we had to figure out how to get a new one is because it was the front door. And it was getting to a point where people didn't want to leave their kids there anymore. And so if people aren't going to come to the front door, then they're never going to be in the full continuum. So it was really a business decision in my mind. So you can see here just highlights of the campus. We're on 80 acres. We were in Camden County. We wanted to stay there, but we really could not find a large enough piece of property. So we made the trek over to Burlington County, and of course we love it here. 70 children live on this campus. If you see outside, those are their homes. They live here for 2 years before they transition out into the community group homes. 265 students attend the school. Half of them live with us. Half of them live at home with mom and dad and our day students. And we have about 120 partnering school districts. This is an aerial view of it. We are right here in this area right here. So you can see the school. It's 2 stories and another wing here. So this is the school. This is the cafeteria in the front. The middle is our health center. So we have a full-fledged health center there that supports the whole campus 24/7. And then we are in the activity center, or the fun part of the campus, I would say. And then over here is the residential. These are just some pictures of when we opened the campus, the school, the homes, and we had, of course, a big vision realized campus. This you saw when you were walking in, and maybe you saw, maybe you didn't. Certainly, we on the tour. We have a swimming pool, gymnasium, indoor play gym. We have a ShopRite Wawa right out there where the kids work, and a lot of event space and conference. Right? That's the gym, and then there's the pool, which again is really one of our favorite spots. And what my favorite piece is the store that they all work in. And then of course the playgrounds. And what I would say that is most important to me about this campus is it was built specifically for kids with autism. So I feel like everything else out in the community, things have to be kind of, tweaked a little bit for kids with autism. This was built for them in mind. So much so that when you walk through the campus, there's nowhere you can stand on this campus where you don't see nature outside, because it is a calming factor for kids with autism. So really focused, had a lot of architects, a lot of people with autism, of course our staff, who I think know them the most. So that's Bancroft's story in a nutshell. But Bancroft is not the only organization, nonprofit, that's too important to fail. And I really, really believe that nonprofits are an important part of our community, yet so many of them do fail. So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, when you think about nonprofits, food banks, YMCA, health centers, mental health providers, cancer, families, family services are all nonprofit. They're an important part of your community, right? Maybe you work there, maybe you utilize them, maybe you sit on a board, maybe you know somebody who needs those services. We need our nonprofits. Yet 1.5 million, or 15% nonprofits fail every year. That's a staggering amount of number to me for organizations like Bancroft that people count on. They depend on them, they count on them, yet they're not sustainable. So let's talk a little bit about that. So why do nonprofits fail? Strong leadership, I'll talk about that, business acumen. You know, I can tell you that when I arrived here, the leadership prior to me were experts in autism treatment. I mean, they had their whole team was people who knew autism, which made us one of the best known. If you were in that field, you wanted to work here to get trained. If you had a kid with autism, you wanted to be here. So I give them credit because I couldn't do that today, or back then for sure. But what they didn't have is the business acumen, right? And you need a little bit of both. You need a little bit about how to provide the service, how to deliver the mission, and you need the business acumen. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Well-intentioned, but inexperienced board members. And I have to tell you, I think this is more prevalent than we even know. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then inability to survive a crisis center. And I feel like we're feeling that now more than ever, right? Coming out of COVID, we see even restaurants, stores, like so many things were unable to survive a crisis. And just some thoughts on that. So lack of strong leadership and business acumen. You know, leadership is defined in many, many different ways, and they're all relevant. But to me, what I think I brought here, especially in the beginning, was decisive decision making. So in nonprofits, I think especially, it's very family oriented. They've been here a long time. They've worked really hard, but they don't have the experience that we need in that role, right? This program has been around for a long time, and even though it's losing money, people really need the service. But it's losing money, we have to close it. So I mean, really, really hard decisions, and I think I brought courage and decisive decision making when I arrived, and I think that's what the organization needed most. And then, of course, business acumen. So what is business acumen? So the first one, no margin, no mission. My favorite mantra, right? You need a margin in order to have a mission. When I came, I came from Penn. It was, again, making so much money. They're a nonprofit. Somebody pulled me aside in the elevator and said, Toni, you keep talking about profit. I want to make sure you know we're nonprofit. And we know that, right? And I was like, oh my God. Okay, so nonprofit is your tax status. Seriously, that's it. We still have to pay bills. But that was the mindset, right? And I think that's what people in nonprofit worlds believe. I mean, if you don't work in it, I remember when I was named CEO and I was being out with some of my friends, and I said, well, no, I just got this new one, the CEO of a nonprofit. And they said, oh, that's so great. That like people really don't understand that we have to run it like a business, and very different from running it like a business. When we need more money, we can't raise our prices. The government says, here's what you get. The state says, here's what you get. Thanks for what you're doing, but that's it. So it's really much more complex, and having people understand that you have to have a margin. You have to make some of these important decisions, or you won't have a mission, I think is important. The funding model is also something about a business acumen that I brought to this organization that did not exist before. For instance, I always saw the company we're one company, but we have 3 business models based on how we're funded. So the schools are cost-based. When you cut your costs, you cut your revenue. When you're in fee-for-service and you cut your costs, you make more money. So they made decisions like, we're going to cut all these people because we're running out of money, and they cut their revenue. Right, so it's really understanding, and in the 19 years I've been here, the models have changed significantly. What used to make money now loses money. What used to lose money now makes, but you got to know that so that you can kind of keep up with it. And you got to invest in growth. And let's talk a little bit about growth. So as I said, as I showed on my slide, growth I think is just an imperative in any company, especially in nonprofits. And in order to continue to grow, you need to build a consistent pipeline, which is why the schools, for instance, are so important to Bancroft, because it is our pipeline. Smart growth, right? So you have to know what's happening in the funding models. So you know what programs you want to grow and which ones you might not want to. It doesn't mean you have to close it. You should be growing company or programs that you're losing every month and money on every individual you're helping out. So it's really being pristine on understanding your business model. And then invest in infrastructure. This is hard for nonprofits, right? Because we operate on this shoestring market. But I gotta tell you, when I came, I was so nervous, right? It just kind of coming out of, okay, we don't have to worry about, the mailman. We don't have to clobber the mailman anymore because, we're actually can make payroll. You're still really nervous about making investments. And so there was a time I was the CEO, the COO, and the CFO because I was just too nervous. And then I finally realized that I got to start bringing one other because I couldn't do it all. And in the years I made the investment, I remember the board pushing back on me. Are you sure we can afford these? Are you sure we can? And in the year that I hired a CFO and a COO, we made more money that year than ever before, which says to me, you have to invest in growth because it's smart growth, but you have to really continue to invest or you won't continue to grow. So well-intentioned but inexperienced board members. So let's talk a little bit about this. I'm a big believer, I sit on a lot of boards. I'm a big believer that the board is just as responsible for the success of a company or the demise of a company as is the management team. Because you're responsible for it. Like, that's your role. It's not just to come and hear what's going on and see what they got to eat and keep moving on, right? It's to really own what's happening with that institution. So when I came 2004, there were 6 separate board members, 6 separate boards. It was 1 parent and 5 subsidiaries. So, in addition to trying to make payroll, I was doing board meetings every night. 73 people, not a typo, 73 people on their boards. 51% per the bylaws had to be family members. Now, while this was a wonderful intention, for sure, these people were committed to the organization, they loved it, they were not anywhere near the skill set of understanding what was happening from an enterprise-wide position. I would come and say, we got to close the New Orleans operation, and then say, Tony, there's nothing in Johnny's refrigerator. There's no green vegetables, and I think that's really important. What are you doing about that? I mean, it was really eye-opening. One of the fathers was on the finance committee. So many sort of memories that are like, wow. It's not surprising they were where they were. I presented my first financial statement at the bottom. I said, we lost 13 million this year. And I said, Tony, I never understood what it meant when there's parentheses around the number. Thank you for letting me know. This was finance committee members. Wonderful man, a wonderful man, but clearly they did not have the right board members. I mean, you think about that, the bank had to come in and say, guys, this isn't working. That's a sign. So, they had some backgrounds, finance, healthcare specialists, but most of them were homemakers. And they were just coming to hear what was going on today. Here was another, on the list of things on to do. So prior to me, or prior to the consultant that came in and became the CEO, there were 2 organizational leaders. So one was the president, one was the CEO. And you see here, they both reported to the board. And what happened over time was their vision split. So the president, he was, the expert in autism. He wanted to be in research. He wanted to, invest in a whole research arm. And the CEO wanted to be nationwide growth. And what happened is the board split, the organization split, and it was also almost the demise of the entire organization. So just, when I was named, I'm clear on that, I needed to be the both, right? And that there was only one leader that reported to the board. So when it was really eye-opening for me to see that how the board was operating was just as part of the problem as the management team. So, what really is the board's role? In my mind, it's really to govern, not manage. right? So we had board members like in the finance department looking at this isn't good, right? That's not your role. It's to govern, not to manage. To ensure your management is effective. So if you think you have to get in there, you don't have the right management team in there. Hard decisions for boards, hard decisions, but they're critically important for the organization. And it's really, I think, the board's role to think about the organization, not about the people. And that's hard, but that's what their role is. Provide fiscal oversight, of course. Fiduciary responsibility. If you don't know what that means, then you shouldn't be on a board. And if you are on a board and you don't know what that means, go figure it out. Right? That's one of the most important things. Nobody has that on the Bancroft board. And of course, fundraise. We're a nonprofit. My development people in the room, right? You need your board to be a part of your organization. So give, get, all of the above. And on that, I have to, of course, talk about philanthropy as well. I will tell you that we would not be standing in this organization today if it weren't for philanthropy. And if it wasn't for Ray, who really invested his time and his resources into this organization, we wouldn't be here today. And that's a reality. And I often say, whether you give $1 or $1 million, you made a difference. We need it all. And it's really important that everybody feels that. I also suggest the organization's greatest needs. So back in the day, like barely making payroll, and Ray was wonderful. Ray said, "Here's my money. You do what you need to do with it." There was other donors who said, "No, we want a playground. We only want a playground." Like, okay, but that playground is going to be empty in 2 weeks when I don't make payroll, right? So it's like really understanding what the needs of the organization are before you really invest your fund. And donor relations are important. Even during a crisis, just staying in touch with people, having them know what's going on, we found to be incredible. I was surprised at how many people supported us, really, as we were going through that financial crisis. And they just, they were concerned about the organization and wanted to be a part of it. So inability to survive a crisis. And, crises, as we've learned, come in many different forms. Certainly the financial crisis that we went through when I arrived, the health crisis that we're still coming out of, quite honestly. Technology. We had our website hacked last week. It's never ending, right? And it's knowing how to get through those things. Natural disaster, Hurricane Sandy, really, took out power on the Hatfield campus for a week. You can imagine 70 kids hanging out in a Holiday Inn. The poor guests who were there as well. I don't know how everybody survived, but really, really difficult times, right? So, when I think about crises and I think about what people are dealing with today, I think that, really being able to stay ahead of it and not letting it be your fall is important. And some of the things I would say we learn is, of course, being prepared. And we can do all the scenario basing in the world. I don't think we would have come up with some of the things that have happened. I really feel like CEOs today are dealing with challenges that are unprecedented, right? Between COVID and so some of the global interactions we're dealing with, the violence in the organization, the diversity issues that are going on. They're unprecedented, but it's our responsibility. And so, really always thinking about worst case and planning for it. I would say identify one leader, something we really learned here. Of course, I was the one voice in the finance turnaround, but my chief political officer was the voice in the pandemic, right? It doesn't always have to be you. Make it be the person who knows how to get through it the best and have an effective communication plan. Communication is a challenge all the time, right? You can't communicate enough. When you're in a crisis, people are alert and they want to know what's happening. And so to be able to communicate effectively, I think is critical. And this was my role during the pandemic. Okay, let's deal with the crisis here, but let's keep the organization going. Right? We still have a budget season. We still have to look at financials. We still have a strategic plan. You can't just stop. I recognize you have to stop a lot, and we did, so that we could deal with the safety of both the staff and the individuals served. But you can't stop your organization from moving forward just because there's a crisis. I think those were really important pieces and how we got through all the ones we've dealt with. And finally, I'll just end with what's next for Bancroft. So, we turned it around, we tripled the size, we built a new campus. Well, now what? So we're planning the future. So our strategic plan is titled Changing Lives, Planning Our Future for 2026. So strategic plan, I think, is critical. for all companies, especially nonprofits, always thinking about where you're gonna be. This is a 5-year plan, we're just ending year 2. But really thinking about where we need to be in 2026. It's building sustainability. The other thing it does, I think it really aligns the organization on what the priorities are, right? So everybody, if you're working on something that's not a part of this plan, push it aside. We need the whole organization. So I really think it helps just align everybody. So just a couple things about the plan. Our level is, you can see it's changing lives. For sure, we believe we've been changing lives for 140 years, and we believe we have the responsibility to keep doing it, and whatever needs are changing. So when we think about changing lives, we've kind of identified 4 specific stakeholders we had in mind as we put this plan together. We want to change the lives, of course, of those we serve. We want to change the lives of their families. Right, so really thinking about expanding our access so we can serve more people helps more families. Right? It helps them understand, live a better life on their own because they know that their child, their loved one is getting help. We want to change the life of our team members. You'll see when I show you the pillars, I think this is one of the most important pieces on the strategic plan. We can't grow, we can't do things better if we don't have staff. And we need to own that. And I think that coming out of the pandemic, every company is realizing our employees need something different from us. And we recognize that, and we are really working to hear them. We want to make their work easier. We want to make working at Bancroft a better feel for them. And I think that that's important. And of course, we want to change the life of the industry. We think that we have a lot to offer. We really want to set some of the standards and best practices. We, of course, want people to feel that they want to be at Bancroft because they get the best treatment. But we also want professionals and providers in other states to know, you know what, you don't have to be a Bancroft to pick up the phone and say, we know you guys do this well. Our Linden's program here, we have 30 children in it. They literally fly half of those kids across the country, Washington, Colorado, Georgia, to get that service. So we know there's a need out there. We want providers to know that we're here to help them no matter where they are. So that was kind of the basis of the plan, and we have 4 pillars, so significantly grow, and that's all about expanding access. We try to open at least 5 new group homes a year. That's 25 kids right off the bat. We're looking at mergers and acquisitions, especially in the school network. So we have 4 schools today. We're continuing to look for ways that we can add more schools, because again, that feeds the whole system. We're looking at where there's gaps in services. So what new services do we need? We just opened an outpatient program for severe behavior. These are kids who need residential but can't get in it. So we can serve them outpatient for 6 hours a day. So really looking for gaps in services. We want to inspire clinical excellence, and that's internally, we want to have the best outcomes for the individuals we serve. Really focused on whole person care there. So it's more than just your behaviors, but it's your whole health too. So a lot of work being done there. And then externally, as I said, we really want to be the go-to for when people need some really difficult, challenging people that they're dealing with. Transform the employee experience. As I said, I think this is one of the most important pieces. This is about making work easier. This is about focus on their well-being. This is about having them pick their own schedules. This is about them feeling more empowered in their work. We want them to have careers. We want them to be at Bancroft because they know this is the employer that they want to be with. And then leverage technology. I was talking to somebody about this. This is a really exciting pillar for us. We're always, as everybody is, upgrading our systems, but this is more about how do we use the new technology today? Technology that you and I use in our lives, right? Siri and Alexis, and alerts, and this and that and the other thing. And how do we build that into the person's sort of life so that they can live more independently? So we're piloting 3 group homes that are smart homes. All the appliances are smart appliances, and really allowing staff to not have to be so intimately involved in a lot of the details, because technology can do that. And really empowering the individuals we serve to be more independent. So I'm excited about that. I think there's going to be a lot that we can learn from it. And so that's my story. You can see that, I do think all nonprofits are too important to fail. What I think are some successful pieces of it: ensure strong leadership and business acumen, those supportive and experienced board, be prepared for the crisis situation, and always be planning for your future. And finally, never, never, never give up, because we're all too important to fail. And that's my story. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? And I'll open it to the people virtually as well. Any questions, comments? Yes.
I would love to hear more. You must have you must have had to do a major board overhaul. You must have had to get rid of a lot of people whose hearts were, 125% into this organization. So how did you do that without just, the acrimony that must have been very difficult?
It's a great question. So when we came out of the financial turnaround, and the executive committee of the board sat with me and said, we'd like to have you be CEO. And of course, I was honored and I was excited and I wanted to do it. But I said to them, like, I'm a new CEO. We're just coming out of a really difficult turnaround. I need a board that's going to support me and not take me in all these different directions. I just don't have time to go in. And to be honest with you, they understood it and said, we as a board, we need to support this as well. And so what we did is we went through every board member and we put them where they better belong. So we formed advisory committees. So, there's a program committee that should be worried about what's in the refrigerator. So go there because that's what you can help them do that, right? And so we didn't kick anybody off. We put them in a better role. It was hard. I would say there were some people I think who were relieved. They were like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what I'm approving and not approving. So there's some people relieved. A lot of people were hard, but at the end of the day, having a core group of board members that really understood what we were trying to build was better. And then we built from there. And today, we have 19 members. We have up to 21. We do have the requirement that there's a family member, but only one, because I do think it's important to have family there. And it's the right family member, right? It's somebody who understands not the specific group home issue, but what's happening at the organizational wide. And we're very focused, as I hope you all are well, about the experience of the round table, right? So we need lawyers and we need a lot of healthcare people since we're big utilizers of it. We've got our insurance company on it. We've got a lot of business people on it. So it's really a much stronger board than ever before. But it was a journey. Yeah, it was a journey. It's a great question. What else? Yes,
I have a question from the chat here.
Great.
It was, who did you include in scenario planning discussions?
That's a great question as well. So, we did it in I would say a couple different ways. We first start with the exec team, right? So there's 4 people on my exec team that truly run the programs. I really listen to their input more than anyone because they are the ones that are actually dealing with the people that we serve and have an amazing perspective on things. And so we started with that, like what could go wrong? And then how, from a support department, could we help you? So, we deal with things. We have a fire in a home. We lose electricity. We like things happen, facility wise. We did scenario plan the pandemic, but for sure we've done things like when the whole home has flu, right? Or like, what do we do when everybody's sick? So I think it starts first and foremost with the people who are closest to the people we serve. But then, this is where I really find value in our committee members and our board members because they are out and working in different companies and dealing with things where we don't even know happen. So really getting their perspective on how do they scenario plan? How do they think about, what's worst case? And we really learned a lot from that. Yes.
What was your amount that you asked the board to get organic, or did it change from when you first arrived or to now?
It's a great question and something we often debate. So let me preface this question by saying that when I came, one of the 6 boards was a foundation board, right? So there were people on there that, like typical foundation boards. And while they were great people and they did good work, when it came down to needing to access the funds because we were in such dire position, they said no. And I was really struck by this. I'm like, well, you're raising money for this mission. And so It threw a lot of the, they're redesigning of the board. I actually closed the foundation board because I just thought like, I just need right now kind of to focus on the board. Now, it's 17 years later and we've never resurrected the foundation board. We have a development committee, but not a foundation board. It's something my chief development officers, I'm sure many people in the room, feel strongly that your board needs to be one of the major donors. And that's not how we recruited the board we have today. They're more of the business operation board. And so they certainly do, but not at the level that I think when you bring somebody to a foundation board that you expect it when you go there, right? Your role is different when you're on a foundation board, that expectation. So we never really had an expectation in the early years. We had some, the families that were there were certainly big donors. So we didn't really, it wasn't really an issue there. But with the change in the board, we're now at the minimum is 1,500, which is pretty easy in supporting our events and, capital campaigns and things like that. But it's for sure a different mix today. And we debate it often, we don't want to lose people because they have to give money. At the same time, we need a board that understands that that's part of their role. So I don't know. Can I ask what yours is?
But I work for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And I do in development. So it's like, I think we've been, I don't know, I guess we've been a little lax with people who've been on the board for a while. There's some who are just joining. So how do you reconcile to saying well, we want you to give this much, but then people who've been on the board for a while, they haven't been us.
Right. So it's touchy. Do you have a foundation board?
Yes.
Yeah. Sure. Do you have a foundation board too?
We do not.
You do not. Does your board support them?
Our board supports, we debated intensely a give and get policy and opted not to set a number because of differences in capabilities.
Yeah.
But we do have a policy that they give to the annual fund, they give to special campaigns, and they support each event. And
So
they,
it's fair.
they
So
do-
without a number, we still expect this.
correct, and they
Yeah.
live up to that.
That's good. That's good.
And I have a question.
Yes.
So you had to rebuild initially a leadership team and then potentially have rebuilt it again over the years.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how you approach that in the market. that
Yeah.
you're in.
Another great question. So, as I said, I was part of a rebuild, right? So we were all brand new and we were kind of all in this together and kind of working through things. There was a moment where the CEO, who, he had been here for 1 year, and he resigned he stepped down pretty abruptly, mostly because of health issues. And so it was like us, like this team of people, and we kind of looked at each other like, now what, right? And, and they looked at me, probably so, like I was looking at the numbers, like, what do you think? And I said, I think we're either all in or we're all out. Like, I can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. We're either all in or all out. And so, we made the commitment. There was a clinician, there was an attorney, there was, the program people, right? So it was one of those kind of come to Jesus moment, like we're in this together. And, and I have to say, we worked really well through the process. We were able to keep everything moving and kind of rebuild. The day we announced, and I remember sitting around the table saying, I think we can be independent. We've gotten to a point where we could either merge, we had a merger partner who was ready, or we could stay independent. And of course, they're all looking at me like, can we? And, I said, I think we can, but again, like, this is, it's going to be tough for a while. Are you all in? And it was clear that there were some people who were exhausted from just what they went through. We're almost looking forward to the merger because, like, it was exhausting, and it really was. And so we decided to stay, of course, independent, and they stayed on. But I could tell, like, now that we're out of crisis mode, now we're in growth mode. That's a different skill set. And it wasn't what everybody wanted to do. And so, again, hard decisions to make, but it was time to change out some of the team again so that we could really begin growing and start focus on the school. When I got closer to the school, something, we talked about, this school was being talked about being built way before me, right? So we talked about the school and people were like, yeah, we heard this before, right? And so, John, I'm gonna call you out. How long have you been here? John's part of the school. Yeah.
29 years.
Okay, 29 years. How many times did you hear we were getting a new school? A lot of times. So as we started getting closer to it, I'm like, no, it's real this time. Like, it's real this time. And once we bought this property, which was about 5 years before we built it, I realized that I needed a whole new team because now, like, I needed to fundraise in a different way because I needed to fund the capital. I needed to market in a different way. I mean, marketing was never anything we really had to do because the state just kind of directed people here. But when we were going to double the size of some of our programs, we now needed to market in a very, very different way. So I needed, to bring that skill set on. We had outsourced our attorneys because, we didn't really do a lot of attorney work. This was attorney work that was brought in a chief legal officer. Like, I really built a new team because of what we were doing here. CFO, like, really because I knew what was coming. So I'm always in the, like, what do I need 3 years from today? And how do I bring that in today so I have that skill set on my team? So when we get there, we're prepared. Make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, fun.
Tony, seeing your funding model, right, and being agile enough, knowing that you have to make those changes to be able to maximize your funding with the various revenue streams. How have you changed your leadership team and or added individuals or put emphasis on making sure you're on top of that as an organization? Are you doing that internally or with external sources?
Another great question. We are doing it internally. And, I've really focused, and I talked a lot about my program leaders. I really made them the experts in their funding models. They have relationships with their funders. They sit on committees with their funders. They know what's coming before it's coming. Like, there's some changes happening now with this is an interesting one. We have a few campuses. Children's is fine, and on our adult campus, they don't want you to live there and have your day program at the same campus. Well, we have that, right? So they're that. Like, what is that going to do to us? Where are we going to put it? Like, there's a lot of changes that happen that if you are not motivated, it comes up and hits you. The school was huge. I mean, we were able to really afford a lot of this campus because we were allowed to put some of the cost of it in the tuition. Right. So having my leader understand that, right? Moving a school, do we know how to do that? Are we allowed to do that? I mean, there's a lot of major, but I really look to my program leaders to be that close to what's happening there and making sure that from that everybody knows, and so that we're prepared and are able to stay ahead of that. And I'll be honest, there's some things that we don't see coming, and then we're in. I would tell you I like being a part of healthcare, especially on some of the boards, because what's happening in healthcare, I've noticed we're about 5 to 7 years behind it, right? So it's so good for me to know kind of where everybody is. And when there was that major shift to outpatient, I was like, okay, this is coming to us. And we have a whole outpatient program in our neuro rehab center. I'll tell you, we were unprepared. And I knew this, like, we put, when we admit into the group homes, we admit 3 a month. When you do outpatient, it's 1 every 15 minutes, right? So that churn and co-pays and how you come for 15 minutes, was so some of these things, like, we learned, now we're in catch-up mode because we weren't staying ahead of that. So there's a lot of change that happens in an organization our size with so many different funders. But, I really think that the program leaders are the ones that own that and really need to kind of help us stay ahead of it. Good question. Yes.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much. I worked for COMAR during the pandemic. COMAR is a mental health and intellectual disability organization based in Kensington. So it was an interesting experience for me, to say the least. Somewhat of a culture shock, having come out of information technology and human resources, running that during the pandemic. Actually, the pandemic was easy to manage than before or after. and it was really daily chaos. So that's one of the things that, kind of really struck me was from an employee perspective, how tough it is. I mean, there were, on the DM side, for example, which is children's behavioral health, where there was a huge need. According to my wife, who is currently a substitute teacher in a charter school, it is an overwhelming need for behavioral, and they're paid $15 an hour on a DM basis. Guess what? The turnover was 75%. Other areas they're a little bit better. So my question really is, faced with chaos,
Good work.
how do you strategically want to manage that going forward? Because, we all know that the competition for folks who work, particularly in the generality of intellectual disability, maybe autism specialists and so on, is a little different, or I hope it is. But how are you strategically planning to manage that workforce issue?
So, as I mentioned, it's one of the most important components of our strategic plan. And it's because without the workforce, we can't do anything else in that strategic plan. And I really believe that we need to transform the employee experience today, because it's exactly as you described. They make low wages. They have the hardest job in this organization. They work unbelievable hours. They work overnights. They work weekends. They miss their kids' graduation. It's unbelievable. And I think we have to really own that and address it. So, we've really, this year, during the pandemic, you really saw these amazing, they were people we already thought were heroes, and they were even more amazing, right? They hung all through that. But like everybody else, we saw a huge decline. We had 22% vacancy, which was the highest I've ever seen in my 19 years. And that's hard. It's hard on the people who are still here because they're stuck, right? They're stuck. And we really recognized, it was 2 years we had that, but we couldn't admit, because I can't keep admitting if there's no, the staff to barely support the people we have. So it really rocked us financially. It rocked us from an access perspective. We had parents at dire. It was eye-opening to me just how much we rely on our staffing. And so we've made some big improvements in, of course, our salary, and we had to, and I don't regret it. It made the financials a little wonky, but we had to do it. We had to commit to it, and we have to figure out how we do things differently so that we can keep them higher paid. We believe that and I'll tell you, we raised our rate and we had 200 in the first quarter, which almost was too many for one time. But we've now stabilized. We now have a nice trajectory. It'll happen again. We know that, we got through this year. We know it's going to happen again. But money's only half of it. I really believe that. They need to work for an organization that cares about them and cares about their family and their benefits and their well-being and how do we help them in their career if you want it. We spend so much time, why don't people, we have the turnover rates as well, right? And we hire 1,000 people a year. And we lose 50% in the first year. And it's hard. It's a hard job.
That's a big problem.
It really is. So really acknowledging that and talking to our employees, like, what is it going to take? Like, how do we make, because it's a hard job. Our workers' comp is an unbelievable number. Our staff get hurt, they get bit, they get punched, right? Like, we need to help them be more safe, right? So really focused on, like, what is the staff needs? Because I think it's the most important part of our future.
So that's your second book.
No more books. Anyway, yes.
There's more time. Maybe we have time for one question.
Okay, sure.
I don't know if you want to pick from the chat. There's few different ones.
Okay.
So either biggest challenges implementing this strategic plan, best ways to diversify funding, maybe how to apply it to for-profit businesses. Any preference or which one you want to answer?
So go back up top. Let me see if I can just run a couple of them. The biggest challenge of the strategic plan, I would have to say is of course the workforce, because it's so critically important. But, I would also say too that, we need funding for this. Interestingly, we did a capital campaign for this beautiful new campus and this tour. You'll see names all over the place. People want to give, we need money to do this too, right? This technology piece to be able to support our employees different. We're finding it very difficult to articulate what we're raising money for, right? Like, give me a project, how much is it going to cost? What are your outcomes? I mean, if funders have different requirements today, different expectations, and I get it, but it's challenging us to think about, raising money for something that's not a building that you can put your hand on, or, that you can put your name on. So I would say right now, that's one of the challenges we're dealing with today. I feel good about it. I think we're well on our way, and we see that things are really beginning to kind of begin to move forward. So that's that one. Diversifying our funding source. I would tell you that the best way to do this is through merger and acquisition. I mean, we're really looking at bringing in different types of services and funding streams. Because if you start it up on your own, it's hard. It's really hard. You don't know the nuances. You don't have the relationships. So we're really, when we think about mergers and acquisitions, we're really preliminary think about it now. We're really focused on different types of funding streams, because diversifying it, I think, is really one of the best ways to do that. Yes, I absolutely think that all the things that I talked about today are in the profit, because that's really my message, is that we need to make a profit. And so I think that some of the things I talked about today are things that all companies need to be doing, not just for profit or not for profit. So, yeah.
I know I already asked a question, but I have another question. I didn't hear a last question. Sorry.
That's okay.
So I'm a development executive. I have been for years. I've worked for 2 nonprofits that were running a 7-figure deficit every year. And so I really related, yeah, I don't know. There was a bad that I did it to myself besides talk, but I did. So that's just the setup for the question I really want to hear from you about how you manage. So that situation really accentuates what I think is a natural tension always between the people delivering the mission, whatever the nonprofit is. You already alluded to it. They're there for their heart. They're not making a lot of money. It's hard work. They're there because it's a deep personal belief. And then the people who are often kind of the suits, the executives, the fundraisers, the finance people who have to look at the reality of delivering the mission. What I have observed, particularly when a nonprofit is in crisis, is that there's a real kind of philosophical conflict. You have to look at reality. You're cutting programs, and these people, the message often to these people on the mission delivery side is they don't care about us. They're just suits. They're robots. They don't care. And so how did you, I'm sure you must have hit this in spades when you were getting around. So how did you handle that with the staff? Try to keep people, help them understand you do care deeply, but there just isn't money to do what they do.
Yeah. It's a great question. And, I would say that I felt it the most when I came as CFO and they named me CEO. I was so nervous that everybody thought all I was going to care about was the money. And I do still today, but I made the absolute effort to be out program and to listen and to care about the mission. And to really, I want to be seen as somebody who knows both sides, cares about both sides, I would say. I would tell you that, it's 19 years later, but I know a lot of staff by their first name, and I'm amazed at how long that goes for them. Like, I care about that. And we educate a lot, especially our clinicians. Excuse me. We learn a lot. They're like, I know we don't get paid for them, but they need this service. We can't provide a service we don't get paid for. That is a message we give over and over and over and again in this organization. So a lot of it's education, but a lot of it is one-on-one interaction. Right? People need to know I'm a person just like they are. I have kids. I deal with the same issues they do. Right? I gotta leave because I gotta pick up my kids at daycare too. Like, I really spent a lot of time really relating to the South so that they could see that it was more than just about money. But it was an effort. It was an effort because I do care about it.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's the part of this.
Jim,
So I don't have a question, I have a comment.
okay.
Make a comment. I heard the presentation at the union. And I said to myself, we have to have this person present to our group. Be compelling, either compassionate, or capable. So, well, I'll sit through this presentation, that is really interesting. But actually didn't take me too long to get back in the mode of listening as a participant. So I think the message is,
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I thought you were gonna say the other one was better. Anyway, thank you so much, really, again, and for those who are virtual, I really appreciate your time and attention. And Beth, if people want a tour, is Nick out there, John out there, someone?
Yeah, we're going, we could go
Awesome.
at 9:30.
Okay, good, okay, good. Thank you, Tony, very much.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.